Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Back at the Ranch. I'm your host, Mod Karl. Some of you guys know me as KF or simply as Karl from Kilimanjaro. And tonight I'm joined by Joshua, who was voted out last night. Joshua, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Of course, it sucks to be voted out, but what can you do? I've gotten some high praise, so I think I'm doing okay.
All right. Well, I know it's like, especially, when you get to make it to the rendezvous and you feel so close to the end and you get voted out, it's not the best of feelings. But like, you should really be proud of your game. You did make rendezvous and
Yeah.
you did make it far into the game. So there is something to be said about achieving that. So you should definitely be proud of your game. With that, let's jump right in, Joshua. Let's talk about the game. What was your experience like with us on Expedition Online?
It's a completely different vibe. Obviously we have a lot of different terminology that we have to learn. So it's almost like we're playing the same game that we all know, but learning about it at the same time. And of course, there's going to be different twists and turns and everything that, we haven't seen before. I played hundreds of games before, and this one is just truly unique in its own way. And I can't say I didn't like it. And I've loved every part of it. So,
Well, I'm happy
except
to
for
hear.
maybe the secluded. I wasn't too big of a fan of that.
Well,
But
I'm happy that overall your experience was generally positive. Now, I do know you a little bit better now, and I do know that you're a little averse to some of these twists, right?
yeah.
And so we'll get to talk about that a little bit in a little bit. But and overall, you did have a good time. And we could definitely see the Finn and you just like come out any chance, any possible chance. So that was very fun to see. That said, you were also lucky enough to be in one of our seasons with actual team captains, where
Yeah.
you got to meet some legends, Janet, Kelly. Like, how was that? Like, getting not just meeting them, but interacting with them too, right? So
Right.
you must
Yeah.
have lost your mind as this was happening.
It's really fun because well, when I first saw it, I applied. We all knew that Janet, Kelly were going to be team captains or whatever. I hadn't watched the past two seasons, so I wasn't sure if they were actually playing with us, kind of like a Aussie coach situation or whatever, or if they were just really mentoring us. And I always said, like, to anybody, I was like, hey, I'm going to apply for this or whatever. I was like, I'm going to vote out Kelly as soon as I possibly can, if that's a possibility. I did not want to play with Kelly. I wanted to be on Team Janet, whatever it is, because I love Janet. And I know Kelly would be somebody to everybody would just swoon over, and she would actually be good at some of the challenges or whatever. So I was like, I was nervous, but at the same time, I was like, it's going to be fun playing with them no matter what. Even if I went out first to one of them, it would be a fun time. But I was excited, yeah, for sure. I mean, as a Survivor fan, and really anytime you can interact with people who have actually been on the show, it's fun. And I'm glad I get to do that through my shop now. Is a lot of interactions and
Yeah.
being able to reach out. So,
What
right.
was it like for you coming into the game day zero as a super fan? And also as someone who's already played orgs before.
So my initial thought every time I play a game is there anybody I know, and is it a good or bad connection? I didn't know anybody going into this game, or at least, I had maybe have seen some people here and there, but I knew most of these people didn't know who I am, and I didn't know really who they were, which is perfect for me because if anybody knows who I am, it could be a rough battle from there. But so that's the first thing I always look for is the people. The second thing I noticed was when we got divided into our little breakout rooms, and we were allowed to talk to each other and communicate before anything settled, and before we got our parties and whatnot. There was breakout rooms and people were able to join and whatever. And I decided to stay in one room because we saw some people moving around, jumping around to different rooms, and immediately people were like, those are the people to look out for because they're already trying to make connections. And I was like, okay, I'm staying in this room then because I don't want to be the one jumping around as well. So it's all, I mean, as soon as the cameras go on and Doc says, here's everybody, that's the game time. You have to start figuring out who you're playing with, reading people as best you can, and possibly just understanding where you're going to be, no matter what position you get put on or what party you get put on, who you want to work with, have that gut instinct.
Who did you gravitate towards, and who did you get a really good sense of when, well, as soon as you started talking to them?
when we were all in the first initial big group chat, I just was absolutely gravitated to two people, Karl and Katie, the two people that were probably the loudest, probably talked the most. And I just love that in a personality, because typically the people who are the loudest don't have a lot of filters, and that means they're going to be the most honest. And so I was like, okay, I want to be as close to these people as possible because they will tell me how it is, or at least be very bad at lying and just keep rambling and rambling and rambling. And I think that would be something that I would like to have done. So I kind of gravitated towards Katie and Karl. And of course, they're very interesting people. And some on the older side as well, according to this cast. And so I figured those are the kind of the people. People like, there was David and I'm trying to think who else. Haley, there are all kinds of people that like I was just trying to find, like I was listening, I was giving my input, and I was trying to just figure out what kind of connections I could make. You know, David's from Cleveland. I have family who's grown up and lived in Cleveland for most of their lives, so I kind of know the area a little bit. Haley's in Florida, one of the few people in the South, so I was like, oh, Southern girl, we're gonna, you know, Southern Alliance or whatever. So I was just trying to think of connections that I can bring up to make anybody, because really you're looking for any reason not to be the first person voted out. And if being in the South with one other person saves me from being the first person voted out, I'm fine with that.
No,
So,
yeah, that's very true. Any commonalities you can find with anyone in the game,
yeah.
you want to use to build these relationships. Now, on the other end of that, were there anyone that you were immediately thrown off by?
I would have to say Cupini, because when he turned on his camera and everything, he's got the Survivor flag in the background. You know, you could obviously tell he's a super fan. Like, of course, all of us are going to be fans to some degree, except for maybe a handful. But you don't want to be the one coming off as the biggest fan in the room, because even in a group of super fans, the person who is the biggest fan is going to get targeted because they're the ones like exuding it. And I knew I was going to exude Survivor fan, so I was happy that we had somebody like Cupini, but I didn't want to work with it.
Yeah, no, that's
And
interesting.
then
Yeah.
people like Philip and Anthony were jumping around different rooms. That was also kind of like okay, they're coming in saying, I want to work with you guys, all right, cool, bye. And it's like that's kind of the bad vibe that we get. But it wasn't anything like, I'm not opposed to having sit down talks with them later on and being like, hey, here we go. And so I'm not too worried about like first day impressions. I like talking to people, but those were kind of like the first big red flags I got from people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so basically after talking for a little bit, you guys are brought into this new room, and we are joined by the legends themselves, Janet and Kelly, and you guys are broken up into two teams. Now, how happy, because you just mentioned that you wanted to work with Janet in any way, shape, or form. Sure. So how happy were you when she personally chose you to be on her team?
I was so excited, and I don't know if it's true or not, but the draft order, I felt like they read it in draft order. I don't think it's true. I don't think that's exactly what they did, but it felt good to have my name read second by Janet, and I was like, oh, it feels so good. So that put me in a very good mood, and then as we were getting more people on our parties, I was really liking who was picked with me. I figured it wouldn't last for long, but it just, it was nice being picked. I was very happy that Janet saw something in me that she wanted me on her team. So
a little birdie tells me that Janet also gave you guys a couple of names before she left you guys to start the game. How did you take that information moving forward into the game?
So anybody who doesn't know the names, it was Neil and Philip. Janet tells us very beginning of the game, says, hey, you guys are a great group. You guys are all loyal, stick together, all that good stuff. And like, of course, Janet's going to say this. Janet is somebody who exudes that Survivor loyalty. She's a very old school player, and I love old school players. That's kind of part of the reason I want to play with Janet, because I knew she would be loyal if she was with you. So I'm glad that she picked the people that she did. But when she told us that Philip and Neil were going to be troublesome or maybe threats later on, I just was loving that. But at the same time, I was thinking, Kelly's over on the other tribe saying the same thing about some of us on our tribe, probably. And it's probably going to end up being myself, because I think I don't remember what my casting video said or not, but I think I was there to have fun and cause chaos or whatever. So I was hoping Kelly wasn't saying anything about me over there. So very relieved that people on the other team were going to be targeted, but very worried about what Kelly might have been saying to them.
It's interesting how the paranoia starts on day 0.
Sure.
But you expect nothing
sure.
less from these games, right? So
No.
yeah, that's funny. Now, on day 1, your team wins the first challenge. And so you guys are exempt. So not much happens there, except that the other team chooses Katie to go with Bridget, if I'm not mistaken, to the serrated peak. And so my question for you, I guess, is how did you receive that first twist? Because again, I don't know that you're someone who, you're a little apprehensive about these twists. So how did you feel when you were first given that information?
It wasn't a huge deal to me because I figured it'd be something a little bit smaller than people getting like an actual full compass on the first visit. So I wasn't too worried about it at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, day 2, you're not as lucky, and you guys end up losing the challenge, and Anthony gets voted out. Now, your party was a party of big personalities, and so is there any particular reason why it was Anthony and not any of the other bigger personalities? Like, what ended up being the decision factor for which personality do I move forward with in the game, and which personalities do I get rid of in the game?
I think, for me personally, I think voting out young Anthony was because I saw that he was going to be more of a game player, somebody more willing to flip on me earlier than somebody like Karl would. And I think I'd like to say that I was the one who kind of like started getting the ball rolling on in Anthony, because he was very heavily targeting Karl at some point. And so I was just like, this can't happen. And I know that Karl is another name that people would be interested in voting for because, obviously he's loud. People are going to start getting annoyed with him sooner or later because he does talk a lot. He does dominate a lot of the conversations. And I really wanted to push it off of Karl because Karl was going to be generally good for my game going forward, because that'll always be somebody that's going to just, as the longer he stays in the game, the more and more people are going to get annoyed with him, especially having to be with him on call, for hours or whatever. And I figured somebody like Anthony would be more of a problem for somebody like me, somebody who also plays the game similar to his way. But he was just being a lot more sketchy, and people were also seeing that. So I just, as long as it wasn't me, and we had an easy vote, I felt like, and it ended up being unanimous against him. So I guess most people agreed with me. So
now, on the next day, you guys get another twist thrown your way. You guys are reshuffled into 3 teams. Instead of 2 teams with much smaller groups now. Navigating these relationships becomes very tricky because it's really majorities are very easily achieved. So first question, I guess, is how did you feel about these about the swaps into 3 teams, and how did you feel about the smaller groups? And also, because you ended up in a team with all men, how did you feel about being in this team with all men?
Oh, lots to unpack there. So with the initial swap, I don't actually mind swaps. I think that's probably one of my favorite things, is seeing the shuffling, because, of course you have the same dynamics within one party or whatever, but when you actually swap, that's when the game really picks up, because then you're playing with people that you haven't played with for 2 or 3 days at a time. And that's where it gets a little bit nerve-wracking. I was fortunate enough to be on a pretty strong tribe, as well as a tribe that theoretically had the numbers. Of course, we never went to a crossroads. We would have never seen what that would have played out with. I don't know what would have happened, but I would like to think that myself, Mike, and Karl would have stuck together, voted out one of the other boys, and we would have been fine. Having said that, the other 2 tribes I wasn't too worried about because, well, let me take that back. There was the blue party that was, I believe, had Bill and all of them on it. And I figured that they would be going to a lot of, or most of the
Crossroads.
Crossroads, because they didn't seem to have the people that would be able to consistently do well in challenges. Like, I love Bill. I know he's good at some challenges, but there's some other challenges he's just not going to be able to be good at. And especially with these challenges that are smaller tribes and you have to delegate a certain section to him, he's going to end up picking that first section. And if he's not good at it, it's going to be rough for their party. Whereas I felt like my party had a very well-balanced party. Numbers wise, that party had the numbers theoretically. My party had the numbers theoretically. And then the other one, the white party, did not. That's the one I didn't want go to Crossroads. So in my back of my mind, if they're losing, I might have to step up and throw a challenge or something just so that we can guarantee some numbers going into a rendezvous.
Also, swaps are also an opportunity to now build newer bridges. And
Sure.
So how did you approach these new relationships in your party, especially given that you guys were given the cushion of not because you guys won, that you didn't have to go to Crossroads? Like, so how was the time used that night to build these relationships?
For sure. I mean, we had, I would say 2 or 3 rounds where we were just kind of sitting around, not really doing anything for 2 hours a night at the end of each party or at the end of each challenge. And I think we just really took that time, not really to, and I think the first day or two, we all just sat in one call. We all talked. We all had a good time. Karl's drinking beers. They're all drinking something. You know, I can't drink anything. So, but, you know, we were all having a good time and talking. And then when we got closer to that second swap, that second shuffle, is when some of the 2 Kellys, I believe it was Philip who initiated, said, "Hey, let's go talk." And so that kind of broke out into everybody, you know, getting in twos and talking and just, you know, getting familiarized game wise. And I think that's something that I utilize pretty good. I think Mike might have utilized it a little bit better than I have. But I think you have to always be open. And I didn't want to say anything revealing to them because I didn't want us to end up losing and then it come back to me from Karl and Mike and then that kind of blow up. So I stayed pretty reserved in what I said to them, but I was still very open to the future, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So was anything solidified? Like anything like really solid put out there, like working together moving forward in the game? Or was it kind of like a tentative, like we're testing the waters, we'll see later on if need be?
We had an alliance of the 5 of us, the 5 guys, burgers and fries. And it was a fun alliance. It was a short-lived one for sure, but it was kind of just thrown out there. I think Karl just said it just to break some tension, whatever, break the ice, whatnot. And really, it wasn't anything bad for us because obviously it's better to have people think that they can work with us, at least to some degree, than them thinking we're on the bottom no matter what they say, you know? So having that 5-person alliance, that 5 guys alliance, it wasn't, I don't think it hurt my game. I don't think it really necessarily helped either because we ended up voting Neil out right after that. And then Philip didn't go out too far after that. But yeah, I mean, it was easy for us to pull them in because we could see a lot of the men were going out. This goes back to what you asked earlier about how do we feel about being on a tribe full of men. We saw a lot of men going voted out, you know, and that's going to happen because we had more men than women going into the season. But, you know, some people were kind of worried about that. And so, again, like any commonality you can have, might as well use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I think the breakdown was actually at the beginning, it was equal men to women, but very quickly, we did see a lot of the men dwindle down pretty quickly. And one of my questions is that, do you think that that visual of a red team with all guys doing really well in the challenge had anything perhaps to do with why men were being targeted so quickly or so early in the game? Because the ratio definitely skewed at some point in the game.
For sure. I don't think it necessarily had to do with us winning. I think it just happened to do with how the other parties balanced out. Because when you take 5 of the men left in the game at that point and then put them on one party and then divide the rest of them on the other 2 parties, it's going to be lopsided no matter what, just numbers wise. So it was probably just something that they used to each other's advantages. You know, I know the white party only had, I think Kupini is the only guy on that party. And they probably just took that as a easy reason to vote somebody out.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that. Kupini the next round. So after the second round as the red team, you guys win again. But it's a double crossroads. So the two losing teams end up having to go to crossroads. Kupini's voted on his team, and Bridget is voted out on her team. At this point, you must be happy because for Janet are doing very well, even on the team where they were not expected to do well. Now, the one interesting thing that happened though was that Philip had the choice to send someone to Serrated Peak, and he chose Mariana. Did you make anything of that at that point?
I like to think that I kind of planted the seed for that, because we were told that Philip had a decision to make, but we don't think it was necessarily Philip's decision to make that. I don't know. I was still kind of confused about that. I think it was actually our party that got to decide, but we ended up letting Philip decide for some reason.
Yeah. No, he was the one that was most vocal, so that's why I guess we say Philip decided too.
Right.
But,
I think people were confused on that, because I think we all thought that Philip had this sole vote in that. So I had just kind of said before he made his decision, I was like, oh, why don't we send Mariana? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, old Kelly has numbers on that tribe or on that party right now. If Bambi at the time wasn't active, so if she wasn't active, she wouldn't get a vote. She would get some sort of self-vote or whatever, and she wouldn't be there. So no vote, that's one away. Now it's 2-2. If you take another one of those Kelly votes away, then my original party, Team Janet, would have theoretical numbers. And so I'm thinking, okay, who would be the easiest person for them to vote against? And I'm thinking Kupini's got to be the one. So I wanted to just kind of throw out Mariana as soon as possible before Philip really had any time to think, so that he's not sitting there marinating. Do I save Kupini? Do I save Mariana? I wanted that to be there. So I said Mariana out loud, hoping that he'd hear it. And I think he did hear it. And I think he kind of agreed with it and just went with it. And then we kind of went back to camp right after that. And you could see on his face, he think he made a big mistake there. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, worked out for former Janets, right?
For sure.
Now, this is the next twist, and I love this one. And this is the one I guess you dislike the most. The secluded party. Well, first you guys are shuffled back into two teams, but that's not where the swap surprise ends, because you now have to compete against a party of returning players who will get a chance to vote one or even two, possibly two players back into the game.
Right.
Describe your internal dialogue when Docs lays out the stakes of this particular challenge.
When I initially heard that, I was so mad, because I was thinking, I'm really about to get Andrew Savage right here, right near the rendezvous or something. And it was just like, it was really frustrating, because in my mind, when I play a game, I want to understand the mechanics. I want to know the reasons I'm voting somebody out. And to have something that I didn't know about, like the secluded party, that changes everything. Luckily for me, I hadn't voted out anybody on the secluded party except for, I want to say, young Anthony. Young Anthony. So I was very lucky in that I had a very low chance of anybody coming back who actually knew what I was doing. But I knew that they were all talking, or I had thought in my mind that they had all been able to communicate with each other. So that still worried me a little bit, but I hadn't had a lot of interactions with really anybody, even Anthony, that much. But it's really frustrating, because when you vote somebody out, you're in the mindset that they're not coming back. They're not going to tell anybody that's left in the game what happened, what really happened, and such like that. So it was kind of worrisome. And I think that's where a lot of my frustrations come from when it comes to something like that, just not knowing. Because had I known there was going to be a secluded party, it's a whole different ballgame. You play a lot different than when you know something like that. If you know there's Redemption Island, you're not voting people out just to vote them out because you know they're going to be threats later on. If they're a threat, you want to get them right when you think they're going to lose a challenge, or when they can't get back in the game. And so there's just a lot of different worries going on as soon as that's going on. And you saw it. I was generally annoyed. I think I was the only person who kind of told Docs, like, I don't like this. This is not cool, Docs. but it's something you have to deal with. It's part of the game, and you have to move on with it. You can't sit and mope around on it. So I picked up my game and changed my cards and did what I had to do.
It's interesting because some people had definitely talked about it, and if I was there, for example, when Jess interacted with Katie, and I saw Jess tell Katie that she had a chance to come back in the game. I know Mariana and Neil had an opportunity to interact with some of the previous the secluded players also. So I was just wondering how much of that information, how much did the people who had that information was big, how much of that information was leaking back into the main camp? And I guess they did a pretty good job at keeping it secret from you guys, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I knew, I didn't know anything. So
okay.
They could have been telling other people. I don't see why they wouldn't tell everybody, but I guess that's up to them. It doesn't matter. Information's power in this game, so I guess that does make a little bit of sense. Yeah. But I really felt like that was something that was actually going to ultimately hurt them going forward, because a lot of the people who were voted out by them, basically.
Yeah, so you basically end up in a party with Karl, Danielle, Neil, Olivia, and you guys, and Mariana, and you guys basically decide to vote out Neil. Now, keeping in mind, Mariana and Neil just had the opportunity to go to Serrated Peak. Now, is there any concern as you guys are voting that potentially they may have an advantage, or like does talk of an advantage come into the decision of who you're voting out?
Right. I think, of course, the talk of advantages always comes out. Who has what? Do we think this person has something? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to vote somebody out. You want to blindside them so that they don't end up playing an advantage or whatever. And I think that's what we were hoping for with Neil, because everybody has this lovely destiny token where you have to blindside everybody, or they could play that. And up until that point, Neil, the Neil vote off, nobody had successfully played once. So I was kind of hedging my bets. I was like, okay, we don't have to worry about this destiny token coming in as much, but we still have to worry about it a little bit. We have to make Neil feel comfortable. And that's where I think the connections that Karl and I had made with Neil really came into play, because we had to make him feel comfortable and tell him, hey, we've got numbers. You just got to vote with us. Don't worry about who it is. Just we'll tell you the name. You write it down. You'll be safe. And I was really hoping that was enough, having spent three days with him prior, to kind of convince him, like, okay, I have to step back. I have to trust these people. And a lot of what I did in this very pre-rendezvous game was tell the people that I want to vote out, like, hey, we've got numbers, but we just barely have enough numbers. If you play that destiny token, you're getting rid of your vote, and that could screw us all over, and you'll have a lot of people mad at you. And so that's something that I ended up using to my advantage, so that people would end up not using destiny tokens, because I don't want anybody using advantages. I don't like destiny tokens. I don't like advantages, whatever. And so, like, if I can eliminate the people using them, or the ability to use them as much as possible, I can play a better game, because that's the game I know how to play.
So you end up losing Neil, but you do get Jess to come back. Jess is voted back into your team. Now, out of all the people, I guess Jess was one of the good options, because she was not a vote you had participated in. But was there anyone else other than Jess, perhaps, that you wanted to see, or that you maybe you absolutely did not want to see? You mentioned you were part of the Anthony vote, so you probably didn't want to see him. Was there anyone else other than Jess that you were maybe interested in seeing come back, that you thought could be an asset to the team? Or was Jess the person you wanted?
It was between Jess and Bill. I was very excited when I saw it was Jess, because first of all, she was the first person voted out of the entire game. So she's going to have spoken to every single person who's been voted out for probably a lengthy amount of time, except for those last few people who just got voted out. So that's kind of my mindset, is like, if she's coming in, she's going to feel so mad about the old team Kelly, hopefully, and kind of spill the beans on what's happening, because she'll be upset at the people who voted her out, basically. And the other person I wanted to meet, it was really mostly just because I wanted to meet them, was Bill. I just think he seems like a cool guy, and been wanting to talk to him, and I've been waiting to get out of purgatory to go talk to him.
Yeah, okay. So basically Jess ends up joining your team. The next challenge works out pretty well for you guys. You win your challenge. You don't have to go to Crossroads. So that's great. But you lose the one after that. And basically, as quickly as Jess came back into the game, she's voted back out. So really, really tough luck for Jess. But can you tell me about your relationships with the people in your tribe at that point? But because it seems to me that you must really like all of them, even the former Team Kellys, because if you're choosing to get rid of Jess, the player with the least amount of connections with everyone, that means that you're thinking that the people that you have are all at least somewhat trustworthy. Am I wrong in assuming that?
No, I think for me, because that was the first party that I had went to that I didn't think was going to be unanimous. And so it was really me putting my eggs in my basket and saying, I have to trust these people because I knew my name was floating around. And I don't know if that was one of them putting my name out just so none of them got votes in case Jess had anything from coming back into the game, because we've seen in the real show that we all love that sometimes when people come back into the game, they get a little something extra to help them out. So we were kind of worried that Jess might have something. And I think I was the back burner. I was the cushion for the rest of them. And I had to be cool about it. I had to be like, okay, that's fine. I'm the cushion, whatever, that's fine. It's a lot. I trust you guys. We're all good. But like in the back of my mind, I'm like, if she has anything, I'm toast.
Yeah, especially because you came in late that night, right? So you missed a part of strategy. So like again, the paranoia sets in.
Yes, for sure. I had not been on for the pre-exemption talks or whatever. So I figured with me not being there, that's an easy. We have somebody to vote for tonight. Not being at the challenge, having forced it out, something that I actually would have been good at, I feel like, is also a knock at me because I could have helped to win. And then the third thing is I show up just a few minutes after they get back for strategy talk. So I'm having to jump in straight away after having already a long day and trying to figure out what's happening. Now, I was lucky enough to have a couple good conversations with Mariana and Danielle and Olivia, and they all told me what's happening. This is what's happening. We're playing Jess. She thinks we're voting you. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I guess I wasn't on, so whatever. But again, back in my head, I'm still thinking. And I have to also talk to Jess and either make her feel comfortable that feel like I'm with her, or I have to be comfortable in saying that I think it's me, and if you have anything, I should play something. And I actually don't remember what I did, but I know it ended up working out either way. But of course, I was sad sending Jess out because I do feel like I had a good connection with Jess, and I feel like I had some good conversations before we had gotten to that point where we had to start voting people out. But it was me finding out if I could trust these people really or not. And that's the kind of risk you have to take right before a rendezvous. You don't want to go into a rendezvous not knowing you can fully trust somebody.
Yeah, you definitely don't want shaky relationships. And just like you said, it worked out for you because you made rendezvous. Congratulations, right?
Thanks. Yes.
Rendezvous is like this one of these pillars, like these achievements who play these types of games seek to achieve, and you did it, so that's great. And you end up winning the first challenge of the rendezvous, post rendezvous. Now, what goes through your mind as you approach strategy session with security? What is it that you wanted to do, and how did that evolve throughout the strategy session?
Well, I mean, I had no intentions of actually winning the exemption because my general philosophy is the person who wins the first exemption always goes home. I can't think of anything off the top of my head of like people who have actually gone on to win the game after winning the first exemption, but like it generally doesn't happen because that person is then seen as, oh, they can win challenges. So I did not want to do that. But the only reason I had to win was to make sure Philip had a chance of being vulnerable at that very first rendezvous vote, because that was going to be something that I think could have been a very unanimous vote, something that a lot of us could get behind. Not everybody, because there were some people that we were still unsure of at the moment. But that was something that I wanted to have on the table because I knew if Philip was safe, I could be the one going home, and obviously I couldn't have that happen. So my main goal was just really to beat Philip. And since he kept moving on, advancing in the challenges, I had to advance in the challenge as well. And so it ended up coming down between me and Philip and Mariana. And so I didn't want to wait to see if Mariana would win or not. So I ended up just taking it. As far as going into strategy talks, it was nice knowing that nobody's saying my name, but at the same time, it's not just about nobody saying your name at this point. It's how do I get the name I want as well? And having safety, I felt like I used that to the best of my ability to going to Philip and trying to get as much information as I could from him, because everybody was speculating. They think he has a full compass. And so we had to figure out, does he have a full compass or not? I knew I had a half a compass at that point because I had gotten one through winning another individual challenge early on in the pre-rendezvous. And so I was kind of bartering with him. I was going to see, like, I don't mind playing this for you, but I'm going to do it at Tribal Count or at Crossroads. And he seemed very offended that I didn't want to give it to him then, which clicked a switch in my head saying, he doesn't have a full one because he's really trying to get this before he goes to Crossroads. And the paranoia you could see in his face, he was trying to barter. He was like, okay, I've got 2 advantages, but I won't tell you what they are. And I was like, I'm the one who's got safety, bud. I don't need your knowledge. I don't need your powers or whatever. So I felt like I used my position in the game the best I could. And I think having that knowledge of he doesn't have a full compass, there's not much you can do. I think I really leveraged that to say, okay, we can get Philip now. There's no consequences unless he plays his shot in the dark. And I think I did a good enough job convincing him that I was going to play it, that he didn't play a shot in the dark or he didn't have one. I don't know, but.
Well, all right. So that explains to me what happens before Crossroads. Now I'm gonna need you to explain to me exactly post-cross, like not even Crossroad itself, between the votes and the reveal of the vote, we have fireworks between David and Katie deciding what to do with their compass, which a very pivotal moment in the game, but also between you and Philip. Why the theatrics is the question.
Why the theatrics? On my end, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but a little bit of negative social credit can go a long way when it's that very early rendezvous. If people think that you're going to be an asshole, you're going to be somebody that's pissing off the jury members, that looks good in their mind sitting next to that person. So if I'm the person who's pissing off the very first jury member, the person who's probably going to have the most sway on what happens at the end game, kind of like the Jess situation, she got to sit in and listen to everybody and she had her own input. Now, Philip's going to have the most input on just about everybody who walks in. He's going to be the first person that's there talking to the next person. They're going to communicate. They're going to talk to the next people that come in. So I figured if one person's mad at me, that makes me look good. That makes me look vulnerable and weak at a final performance. So I figured, a lot of what I do in this game is I would say most of everything I do in the game is intentional, and pissing off Philip was hopefully something that would benefit me later on when it got to closer to the end game, if I was lucky enough to get there. Okay. And then as far as Katie and David, I don't know where that came from. I had never heard of anything of that. When it first came out, I was so shocked. I didn't know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think you were the one seeking to get a villains. But like after the whole David and Katie thing, people almost forgot about what happened with you.
I know.
And David became the villain of the season, which, as for us mods who kind of like knew a little bit more of the backstory, that was like really like, we were like, wait, what's going on here? But but that's how things played out. And so moving on to the next round now, Haley wins the challenge, and we start seeing this pattern among in your season, which I thought was very interesting. You guys start targeting any trios or duos, and for the next few votes, it's strictly breaking up all the at least open people, the people that are openly working together are
Right.
broken up. So the first vote is Haley wins the challenge. You guys vote Katie out, so one of the two people from her trio, and then the vote after, David wins, and you guys vote Haley out, leaving David alone. Now, how big was your contribution in making the Katie vote unanimous, and how much did you have to do to get other people to vote Haley, so that because your name was on the other name being thrown out that night too, right? And I also know that you were trying to push for Bambi for a little bit as well. So how did you change your mind, and why?
So for the Katie vote, it was fairly easy to get a unanimous vote on that, because I think everybody was like, at that point, seeing that Katie was kind of explosive. If something didn't go her way, or she didn't think it was going her way, she was going to explode on whoever she thought did it to her. And so having seen that backlash on David, of course, I want to keep David over Katie, because now Katie hates David. That's perfect for jury management, kind of like the same thing I did for me, hopefully. And I was just thinking, like, as long as, or I was thinking, how do we break the news to the group of Haley and David? And I think I was the one who stepped up and went to talk to David and tell him, like, listen, Katie's not happy with you. And right now, everybody's voting for Katie, and you're going to look like a fool if you don't vote for Katie too. And he was shocked. He was shocked to hear it. And, but he ended up voting with us. So he believed me, of course. And then as far as, the vote between me and Haley, I think at that point, I knew that it was going to end up being one of the two of us. And I had to not explode. I had to be calm, and I had to trust the people that I had been working with, and be civil, be relaxed, because if I start freaking out, it's going to be the same thing that we saw with Cupini, the same thing we saw with young Anthony, is that I could be somebody that could be danger later on if I'm causing chaos, if I'm stirring the pot or whatever. So I wanted to appear level-headed to everyone, so that people felt like they could trust me, and I wanted to give insightful information, insightful thoughts, and what a lot of what I ended up doing was telling people why I'm a better reason to stick around than Haley. And I think it ended up working out anyway. So
You like, I mean, it ended up being Haley and not you, and that's good for you, obviously. But do you think there's a reason why it didn't end up being Bambi? Because that's originally, if I'm not mistaken, the name you wanted out.
So Bambi was the easy person for me to throw a name out at the very beginning of every round. I had never talked to her. I don't even think I had talked to her much at the rendezvous, the first few ones, just because I had no real connection to her. And it was kind of on that same level of like, well, if I'm not talking to Bambi, people kind of understand that if I'm talking to them, I'm wanting to work with them. I'm not talking to Bambi, so people think I don't want to work with Bambi. So if I'm throwing Bambi's name out, that means if I'm talking to them, they're going to think that I'm not throwing their name out, because I haven't spoken to Bambi at all. I've been throwing her name out every round. It was just kind of like an opener. Like every time a challenge was won, Bambi didn't win, I would say, we doing Bambi today? Just because I never really necessarily wanted her out. You know, of course, at some point it would be better for her to go out. But it was just kind of like to get the ball rolling, so people didn't feel as
you were deflecting from what you really wanted.
Yeah, deflecting from what I really wanted, just because I didn't want to be the person who threw out the wrong name. And it was always easy for me to say Bambi. And then when I say Bambi, that makes people feel more comfortable to throw out another name. Be like, well, I don't necessarily want to do Bambi, but how about, and that's how we get going, and we get a conversation and we agree on something.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, now, unfortunately, this next round is where your duo gets targeted. Olivia wins the challenge, and the party ends up, the rendezvous party ends up voting for Karl. Now, what was really interesting that night is that you and Karl spent a lot of the night together in a room, rotating with one or two people in and out of that room. Right. But the entire time, your names were being brought up in every other room. And I'm wondering how, at least for your duos, for I guess that's also a question more for Karl, but how do you feel about the fact that your duo got targeted that night where you guys didn't have the opportunity to talk to everyone else? Right. Did you even realize that you guys had been stuck in a room together that long, or did it just happen and and the rest is history?
It was quite unfortunate because every time I had wanted to jump into a new room with somebody else, it would already fill up. And so I was kind of like, I would either have to sit at base camp where I couldn't really talk anything because anybody could join at any time, or I could stay with Karl, somebody I enjoy talking to, somebody that agrees with me similarly, plays a similar game to me, just very vastly different personalities. But I think he agreed with a lot of I've said, albeit JT, Steven, Nick, Adam, or Nick and Christian, whatever you want to call it. I think he needed me as like that strategic force, and him to be that big personality that kind of cools me down. I cool him down, the back and forth. But having ended up being with him a lot longer than I thought I was, and I was able to talk to, I believe, Danielle, Mariana, and Olivia, and they had both let me know it's you or Karl. And that told me enough that it would end up probably being Karl. So I kind of just stepped back. Okay. I went and talked to Karl a little bit, but like having people come up to you and tell me that it's between the two of you and they're going to push for me, or like push for Karl. That told me enough, because I also knew Mike had half a compass at that point, and it would only make sense for him to keep me around as well. And I'm thinking, okay, that's 4 votes right there. I'll just play my shot in the dark. I don't have to vote for anybody. I don't have to step on anybody's toes and worry about next round. That's all I have to do. And of course, I hate seeing Karl go home, but at the end of the day, I think it was better for my game that I didn't have somebody attached to my hip, and that I didn't have to play the game 4 as well.
How much do you think that having a half compass to potentially play with Mike was kind of the factor why you were saved? Like, do you think that played a role, that you were kept to potentially be able to play that compass, or that you don't think that factored too much into their decision?
I don't think it factored into anybody else's decision other than Mike. At that point, Mike had a little bit of sway in a few votes, like a David and a Haley. Mm-hmm. Haley wasn't there. A David and an Olivia, and maybe a Mariana. Well, maybe not Mariana at that point, but you get what I'm saying. He had a little bit of sway. And so having that potentiality of having somebody who needs my half a compass, needs me to be in the game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking. So like, do you think he was able to, do you think he had to act? Do you think that he had incentive to convince them not to? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think he had incentive. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, the next one, I also have to say, Karl's vote out is also really interesting, because as you now know, now that you're in jury, Karl did not use his token.
Right.
And so that created a little bit of chaos, which I think you definitely benefited too. I think the fact that you are now a solo player, well, you were seen as more of a solo player, and the fact that there was chaos, definitely distracted from the target that was on your back. And so Bambi wins the next challenge, and the communication between Olivia and Mike just completely shatters, and the two basically start gunning for one another. For you, when it came to that vote specifically, because it felt to me like you had a pretty good relationship with Danielle, a pretty good relationship with Olivia, and a pretty good relationship with Mike. So 2 of these people end up being the 2 options. How do you choose which one do you go with? Like, how did the previous round affect your approach to the game, and helping you decide who to vote for on this round?
My decision was based off of what I thought could get me farther. And in blindsiding Olivia, like we did, not only did we end up getting rid of Mariana's compass, but it also built a trust between me and Mike, me and David, and me and Bambi. That's where I started talking to Bambi a lot more and having real conversations with her, and building that connection with her, telling her like, hey, I know I've been throwing your name out. I'm going to be honest about that. I just didn't talk to you, and that's my fault for not reaching out to you. And I tried playing a little bit of a sympathy card, being like, hey, I'm sorry, let's work together now. So having built those connections, I also knew that I could go back and still rely on Mariana and Danielle to some degree because I could easily paint. Mike is the one who came up with this, and kind of pit other people against each other. Same thing with the Destiny tokens being played. I definitely use that to as much of an advantage as I can. I didn't know if Karl played it or not. I didn't care if Karl played it or not. I was going to say two people didn't vote correctly, didn't vote the person they were supposed to vote. And that means two of you are lying and two of you can't be trusted. And I think that really helped get me to where I was at that point. So, yeah.
This now brings us to basically your last day in the game. Unfortunately, this time it was Danielle who won, and you're the one who ends up being voted out. Now, from 1 to 10 at this point in the game, how surprised were you that your name came up and that you ended up being the choice to be voted out? Because the decision basically at this point was between you and Mariana. And it ended up being you. So like, was that a surprise to you at this point in the game, or did you kind of like at this point kind of felt like the momentum was no longer behind you?
With my name coming out, I was definitely not surprised because I think my name had been in the pool of people getting voted out for the last 3 rounds at that point. What I was shocked about was actually getting voted out because I figured having half compass and having half with Mike, I figured Mike would want to keep me around. If he got rid of the compass and said, okay, he can go out at 5, that gives me a better chance of having more shields going farther. Because at that point, I think it was pretty clear to everybody else that it was Mike and Josh doing a lot of the heavy work of the season, and what the jury would be maybe favorable toward. And I think the people inside the game, we all thought David is doing good as well. And so in my mind, I thought if I was even in any trouble, which I didn't think I was, I really thought we were all banding together to vote out Mariana because that's what Mike has been wanting since like the very beginning of Rendezvous. I thought, okay, I'm safe for this round. I just have to get by final 5 and I have a good shot at this. And when the votes, got around, I really thought if Mike thought I was in trouble, he would have paid the half a compass on me because he needed me. I felt like going forward in that game to have a number, to have somebody that would vouch for him and potentially go to the end with him if I did end up winning challenges. So I was really shocked when I found out Mike didn't play something and he knew that I was going.
Yeah. Do you think that was a mistake on his end for his game? Do you think he's going to have to pay the consequences for that later on in the game?
I think there is not a chance that he gets the final 3 now. I think if he doesn't go home at 5, he definitely goes home at 4. But again, I guess we'll never know. He might have a complete grip on David and Bambi and not have to worry about this at all. But I don't think he's without the safety of a compass at 5. If he does not win that challenge, I don't think he's lasting much farther than that.
Well, this kind of brings me to my next question. Now that you're out of the game, who are you rooting for? Like, not necessarily just who do you think is going to make it. You can tell me who you think has the best chance of making it to.
Right.
But who are you actively, out of the players remaining, who do you want to see make it to the end and win it at this point in the game?
My initial thought is I want Mike to win. I know he's stepped on some toes. I know he's played a dirty game in some people's eyes. But in my mind, I think I would be the happiest if he came out as the winner of the season, just because I feel like he and I played very similar games. We have a similar mindset. And if I can't be happy with how I would win, I would have to be not happy with how he would win. So I think Mike would be the person I want to win. As far as who I think will make it to the end, I'm sure Bambi will be there. I feel like she hasn't really done a whole lot game wise. She's been a lovely person, somebody to talk to. She's intelligent, but as far as strategy and game, I don't think she's been involved in a lot, and I think she'll be dragged to the end.
Okay. Now, if I were to ask you what was your highlight of the season and your low light, what was the thing that you're most proud of and the things that you're least proud of? What would those moments be for you?
I think the highlight is just being able to have the connections that I was able to make, just the real personal bonds that I was able to make with people, and have real conversations. Because a lot of times in these games, you get on and you talk strategy, and that's pretty much all people do sometimes. But it was really nice to meet real people who had real lives, and talk about something other than Survivor for an hour at night.
Yeah.
And as far as probably the worst thing to happen, I mean, cop out, I get voted out, but no, I think the one thing I was most upset about was the secluded party. I think like right when I heard about that, and maybe right at the beginning when I heard about like Destiny tokens or whatever, I was like, I'm not really happy about this, but whatever, like I'm generally somebody who enjoys most of the experience, at least, so I'm not too upset about anything.
Did you think you got to learn? Was there any takeaway for your game, the way you approached the game? Like, did you feel like you learned something about yourself or about you approach the game? It's like, how are you going to apply the lessons you learned here to your future games, or maybe potentially Survivor itself?
Right. I think for somebody like me who is outwardly nerdy, somebody who, I look like a super fan. I can't hide it. I could take the glasses off. I could probably put on like a suit and tie. No, maybe not that, but like something boring or whatever, and not look nerdy, and look maybe redneck or whatever. But for somebody like me who is just outwardly nerdy and super fan, whatever, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just hard for me to actually like get to that end spot. So I don't think there's much else I could do. I think I do the best with what I'm given pretty much all the time now. I've played a lot of games. I understand how I play, how I need to play, how I need to approach different people, alliances, games, idols and twists, advantages, blah, 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 blah. So I think the only thing I could take away is just be a little bit more vocal when you are getting closer to that end game, to the people that you are hoping to work with, to really emphasize why they need to work with me. I think that's the only thing I need to work on.
No, that's a good point. Like, it goes back to like this. I feel like it's a theme that comes back in a lot of my interviews so far. Is communication. You cannot underestimate communication in this game. Right. And so yeah, no, that's a very good point, a good takeaway. Well, Joshua, with that, I want to thank you for coming back at the Wrench with me. It was very fun watching you play the game. You had a great season, and so we hope we get to see you back again in some form or another in the future. So thank you so much. I'll see you at Final Ascent and at the reunion.
Yep. All right.
Have a good night, Joshua.